Hey guys, welcome back. It's time. I really should have made this a long time ago, but was holding back on doing so, both out of the blind hope that maybe, someday, eventually, the need for an episode on her would vanish, and out of fear of what would happen if I actually went through with it, cause you know Eula memes. But since the beginning of 2023, it became sort of a meme on my channel to roast her and by extension her fans, all in jest mind you. Today though, we're dropping the memes and going full on discussion mode. So for every Eula main out there coming in thinking this entire video is going to be one massive joke, I'm hoping you'll take my word for it that I'm going to remain as objective and unbiased as I can possibly be. Eula may very well be the most tragic 5-star character to ever exist in Genshin Impact. Not only does her dignified and somewhat pretentious attitude belie a sense of loneliness and depression spurred on by her clan's infamous reputation, but her history as a character has also been one filled with great promise that was all but neglected. How Eula went from the upper echelons of top tier to near obscurity, whose status is only preserved out of loyalty rather than necessity, is one that I think sets her apart from other wide-known place characters, even those who followed a similar downward trend such as Diluc. Like her few friends in Mondstadt, there are players who claim she's undeserving of the poor opinion the general public has towards her, and ever since, it's been a never-ending debate over where she truly belongs relative to the competition. The question is she even meant to be compared to others? Or true to her isolation, should she merely exist as a deviant option for players to go into and not be associated with others whatsoever? After countless requests from my viewers ever since I began this series on Vars 2, today we'll finally be discussing why no one plays Eula. Eula was one of the earliest 5-star characters in Genshin, arriving near the tail end of version 1 back when the game and its meta were still in their infancy. Still riding off the worldwide popularity of the game, her character demo received copious amounts of attention, becoming the 4th most viewed video on Genshin's global YouTube channel and the 2nd most viewed character demo only behind Zhongli. Timing-wise, her release was impeccable. For the first year of the game, the range of 5-star damage dealers was quite limited, and it wasn't until just shortly before her that universal answers were given to us. Our choices for said universal answers were Ganyu, Xiao, Hu Tao, and Child, serving as their respective elements' best, or rather only choice for damage. As the day 1 character and a very popular choice due to his ease of access and low investment floor, Razor was the champion of free-to-play players, representing physical damage dealers. So when Eula came out in version 1.5, everyone believed her to be the 5-star physical damage unit, in line with the 4 I mentioned above earlier. And she was, by all accounts, a direct upgrade to Razor in every conceivable way. With her very appealing design and a large number of players building a connection for physical damage thanks to Razor, reception towards Eula was very positive, and she did not disappoint, at least in the beginning. With her main competition being mainly Hu Tao, who was at the time the strongest damage dealer by way of her own properties and the pyro element's dominance, Eula surprisingly managed to hold her own. While Hu Tao was more consistent and lenient in terms of reaching her full potential, in the right circumstances, Eula could match or easily outburst her and everyone else in the game for that matter, courtesy of glacial illumination. Following an initial blast of cryo damage for the next 7 seconds, further instances of damage from her would charge up the power of her Lightfall sword, upon which it would crash down and explode, dealing heavy physical damage to all targets in the area based on how many hits Eula got off during that time. What made this attack so devastating was how much damage every stack could generate, and the fact that she could, albeit with difficulty, generate a maximum of 30 stacks. Assuming rank 10 at full power, Lightfall Sword's explosion could deal upwards of 5,000% in damage, being the most powerful single blow in the entire game. Would that it could have an amplifying reaction to multiply it further, but even on its own, Eula's burst was nothing short of exquisite, especially for its time. The likelihood of consistently reaching max power was uncommon unless you were C6, but even at 20 stacks, it could deal monumental amounts of damage. And the best part was that all you needed in terms of external support was the physical resistance break from Superconduct. Given her premature understanding of team optimization, also due in parts to there not being too many units to work with, Eula, for a time, stood in contention as maybe the best damage dealer in the entire game, as Xiao was always a niche character and Child's potential had yet to be discovered. While Ganyu was also a 5-star cryo unit, she specialized more in crowd control and general clearing instead of outright DPS. Conveniently for Eula, Rosaria was added one version before her, who offered a token amount of support for physical units. All things considered, Eula had a terrific maiden voyage, who was only really held back by the fact that she was a physical damage character and therefore kind of an acquired taste, which is why I feel like her story is more tragic than other characters who fell off. For Diluc, he was a very popular character at the beginning because Genshin had such limited options. It was either him, Kotsing, or Klee basically. For all intents and purposes, he's not that much better than 4-star damage dealers if we look at his numbers, hence why he got almost immediately replaced by Hu Tao, who was the first character to have the range of damage or effectiveness we expect to see in 5-star DPSers. Eula's numbers were comparable or possibly better than Hu Tao's, so objectively she was quite good, though miHoYo was aware of the lack of elemental support for physical units and inflated her numbers to a point where she could match the rest of her peers. But contrary to popular belief, her strength withstood the test of time for a decent while. Beginning in version 2, the meta power crept substantially with the inclusion of Ayaka, Yoimiya, Shogun, and Kokomi. The needle was pushed even further as more team-centric supports came out, such as Yelan, Yunjin, Shunhe, and Goro. During this time, using a dedicated team composition became widespread practice, even for casual players. No longer was a character evaluated on the basis of individual performance, with maybe one support unit backing them. It was now about how well that unit could benefit off of the support of an entire team. Version 2 became the watershed moment that started the ever-growing divide between the 7 elements and physical. The buffs in version 1.6 to transformative reactions, along with considerable expansions to every element's roster, allowed elemental units to advance in strength at a pace far greater than Eula could keep up with. Yet despite that, she managed to hold her own and be seen as a worthwhile, though perhaps less efficient alternative to the current meta. But things were getting bad for her. By that point, it's been well over a year since any support was given to physical, leaving her with nothing but the sparse remnants of physical support that was now far too outdated in regards to the current expectation. As elements became stronger and stronger with more help and more support, Eula was getting nothing. Unfortunately, what little she still had going for her was almost virtually eradicated around version 3, as Dendro became playable and brought with it the 2 strongest reactions in the game as we know it, Hyper Bloom and Aggravate. Version 3 also marked a complete shift in everyone's predisposition towards reactions. Before, it was all about who could deal the most amount of damage in a single blow, as it was far easier to time reactions on one attack versus a dozen. That's no longer the case. Quantity reigns supreme. I'd be hard-pressed to say a character's own damage output carries the same equity as it used to. Nowadays, it feels like DPS is more about how many reactions a character pulls off, not how much damage they themselves do, a sentiment that went against everything Eula stood for. While everyone benefited from the privileges of elements, Eula was all about individual strength, choosing to rely mostly on herself and her own power. Mind you, she did receive small indirect buffs here and there, such as Raiden Shogun's elemental burst damage buff or Yunjin's attack speed buff, but it was very clear what direction Genshin was taking. Characters were growing increasingly stronger both from within and without. Several version 3 units like Alhaitham, Nahida, and Nilou not only had the blessings of an overpowered kit, but the blessings of Dendro's vast power at their disposal, all while Eula and physical were becoming more and more obsolete through no fault of their own. Support for physical did arrive in version 3.5, but by then it was too late. Nika's inclusion may have bumped up Eula's usability to some extent, but he should have been added back in version 2, and then another support would have had to come in version 3 to offset the disparity between physical and Dendro, if we're talking about an ideal scenario that is. In a poetically tragic turn of events, Eula, just like how she was left all alone and shunned by the public, purely because of her lineage, her status and viability as a damage dealer in-game has dwindled to near irrelevance purely because of her element. What makes this all the more sad to me, and I'm not just saying this to please the Eula mains, I genuinely stand by this, is that Eula still has what it takes to be a top tier unit. She never fell off. She was actually overpowered when she first came out. Had physical units received the same degree of support and development that elements had, she would have been able to hold at least a respectable if not high placement on tier lists. In fact, she's still holding on. While it's true that no amount of help will allow her to outperform Dendro teams or maybe double Hydro, she still manages to hang on, if only by a thread. Unfortunately, in this stage of Genshin's development, Eula's gonna need a lot more than just new support to make things work. A lot of her current issues stem from physical as a whole. I recommend you watch my video on physical after this one to learn more about that. The biggest reason why no one plays Eula anymore concerns the aforementioned direction Genshin is taking. These days, we've moved past the point of looking at individual characters. Now it's about engines. In the past, it used to be like, here are characters who can support X. Now it's, here are teams that X can be used in. Even in hypercarry teams like Raiden Shogun, it's less about how well other characters can support her and more about how well she can receive the support of other characters. The focus is no longer on just one unit, it's about the team. This intrinsically goes against Eula's entire design. To use her optimally, you have to field supports that specifically adhere to her win condition, that is, getting 30 attacks off as quickly as possible and amplifying the strength of her burst. Problem is, physical units gain absolutely zero benefit from elemental mastery, a critical stat given how reaction DPS comprises a huge portion of a party's strength. Additionally, elemental support is more splashable than non-elemental support. For example, Kazuha is an Anemo unit who offers a staggering amount of elemental damage boosts from his passive talent, letting him buff every single character regardless of if they actually care about Anemo-related reactions. Elemental damage boost increases Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, Anemo, Electro, Dendro, and Geo damage unconditionally. The only thing it doesn't boost is physical damage, making Kazuha all but worthless for Eula, who probably would have loved to have him on a team otherwise. In other words, Eula is the most stringent 5-star DPS on the one element that can't afford to be. If she was exactly the same, but as a pyro unit or heck even full-on cryo unit, as in if Lightfall Sword dealt cryo damage, things would be very different since that means she could benefit from Shinho's buffs or Kazuha's elemental damage bonus or even reverse mount. It's because she's a physical damage dealer that she can't avail all those potential bonuses. Now I know many of you will argue that if she had those bonuses that would be extremely broken and that they wouldn't have given her 5000% damage if she did elemental damage, which is true, but those bonuses are far more valuable than any amount of base damage when you take into account the current state of the meta. Eula is effectively and quite literally all on her own. The only support she can receive is direct numbers adjustments like decreasing enemy defense or physical resistance or increasing physical damage. That's it. There aren't that many ways you can do that. You can augment the efficiency of an elemental unit through many different ways, an example being the one I said earlier, elemental mastery or elemental damage. You can augment their strength by making it easier for them to pull off reactions too. Shinobu makes boom teams more efficient by offering healing on top of Electro application, freeing up a different slot for something else, so on and so forth. Adding insult to injury, Eula can't even take advantage of the strengths of the element she's affiliated with. Despite being a cryo unit, Phys is inaccessible to her. As a greatsword user, she automatically triggers Shatter against frozen enemies, breaking them out of the status effect for a non-existent amount of damage. The cool part is that it would be very convenient if she could freeze targets, keeping them in place so that she doesn't have to chase after them and can get as many stacks as possible. Ironically, Razor has basically discarded his physical damage identity, choosing instead to make use of his JoJo stance Electro application for Aggravate or even Overload Burgeon. Since Cryo is exclusively defined by Phys, of which Eula can't even use, she's stuck with physical whether she likes it or not. There is no amplifying or transformative reaction for physical damage either. Superconduct applies a very strong 40% res break, but at this stage of the game, it's become a crutch instead of a bonus. Even then, status debuffs cannot be layered on top of each other. You get no benefit from triggering Superconduct a million times. All it does is refresh the timer. On the other hand, multiple instances of Electrocharged, Aggravate, or Bloom mean more damage, so it's in your best interest to get as many of them off as possible. There's no cap to how much value those reactions have, whereas there is a cap for how much value Superconduct has, and that cap isn't very large. What frustrates me, and I'm sure many of you, is that Eula's kit in concept is really good. Her passive talents are great, her constellations are great. She could be such a good character if she was literally anything else but physical. She has all of the makings of a fantastic character and so much potential to be optimized and improved upon, but all of that is cripplingly hamstrung by her element, or lack thereof. The fact that she still manages to be usable, albeit with a lot of investment and maybe some copium, proves she still has what it takes to be a strong character. If only they gave physical the same advancements as they did the 7 elements. I get that focusing on non-elemental damage undermines the experience of Genshin being about mixing and matching them, but then if that's the case, why did they make Eula deal physical damage? I ranted about this in my physical video, but if you're pushing for a game all about mixing elements together for stronger effects, why did you make Eula deal physical damage then? Why not just make her Lightfall Sword deal cryo? At least that way she can use reverse melt and elemental mastery / damage boost and take advantage of new characters. And one last thing, because it bears mentioning, they haven't done a rerun on her in over a year. Last I checked, Eula's latest banner was on November 24th, 2021, over a year and a half ago. That also plays a part in why her usage is so poor. I'm beginning to understand why Eula mains are coping so hard about the character. She has to be quite possibly the most unfortunate character in the entire game. She has a fantastic kit and a digestible yet extremely effective win condition that's been screwed over by miHoYo's lack of foresight and planning. It's amazing that amidst all the upgrades to the elements, she's still viable. Not optimal, but viable. All in all, Eula is and has been in a very bad spot for a long time, and none of it is even her own fault. With the sole exception of being physical, her kit is relatively future-proof on paper, but because she's physical, it's not. I would say the only hope for her is if miHoYo by some cosmic alignment changed her Lightfall Sword to deal cryo damage. Otherwise, all we can do is pray that they release a physical unit with Goto levels of buffs that they can give to her. Anyways, I'm gonna stop here before it gets any more ranty. There you have it though, the long-awaited why no one plays Eula. Let me know if you found this video insightful, and as always, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.